Welcome back to yet another episode of Miller's Movers, where, as ever, we're not short of a few things to talk about. And we have to start with the Fighting Fifth hurdle up at Newcastle, Grade 1 on Saturday. But in a break from others, we are going to start in the right order. We're going to start with the winner, Golden Ace, who has now won 2 Grade 1s, isn't perhaps getting the recognition she deserves. And when it comes down to it, racing is about going from A to B, over the obstacles in front of you, faster than your rivals, and twice she's done that now. She did it at Newcastle. I thought she was very gutsy. I thought that was the best I'd seen her. She travelled really well. She jumped slickly. Amsterdam looked for all money like he was going to pick her up the home straight. He travelled very powerfully in contention, but she pinged the last and she put her head down and she ran to the line. Amsterdam, he looked to run around. Golden Ace is far from a vintage champion hurdler. Of that, of course, there is no doubt. But she gets the job done. She's thoroughly consistent. She takes advantage when others falter. And it's to Jeremy Scott's credit that he has this horse ready to run and to pick up these prizes. Amsterdam, well, he was the big talking horse coming into it. This was only his third start for Willie Mullins, so perhaps he deserves to emerge with a bit more credit than I'm going to give him. It's only his 5th lifetime start. But my gut instinct, and I often follow my gut instinct, I try not to overthink things too much, is that he could have gone past and he chose not to. He's won on the bridle his last couple of starts in Ireland. He's never really been tested. And I thought, having travelled into the race looking like a bit of a monster, he then rather whimpered out of it in the closing stages. He ran around. He looked to hang in behind her, and I didn't like his head carriage all that much either. Now, there were vibes coming out that maybe he was going to need this first run, and they were a little bit concerned about coming to the UK for that first run. So if you're against me, I completely understand why you are, that maybe he is a young horse and he's going to improve. But just on what I saw, I can't see this horse getting to the bottom of the Cheltenham Hill and sticking his head down. And if you offered me a match bet, jumping the last upsides in the Champion Hurdle come March, Golden Ace or Amsterdam, I would take Golden Ace every time, because we know she's got stamina for the trip. We know she's got the aptitude for that hill and the attitude to take it on. And for Amsterdam, I would be slightly questioning whether he's going to go through with his run and really dig in deep. Then, of course, we must get to the crux of what we all saw at Newcastle, which was, again, sadly, Constitution Hill crashing out earlier than he's ever done. It was very nerve-wracking watching him down at the start. He pinged the first, and I sort of took a bit of a sigh of relief and thought, oh, maybe this is normal service resumed. But just a few strides later, the second hurdle came up for some unknown reason. He came out of Nico de Boinville's hands. There was an extra stride there. He chose not to take it. He picked up and then crashed down into the middle of the hurdle. And then, of course, on the next lap, the New Line did the same. The New Line, he was going out to his left. He was coming down at racing pace. And to my mind, he made a novice mistake when beaten. I don't think he's got the speed for this 2-mile test. But Constitution Hill, there was no reason for it. I think it's very harsh to sort of try and blame Nico. And you can see from across the spectrum of Racing X, where, of course, there are a few clowns, there are also lots of considered people that do have an opinion that's worth listening to, and their opinion varies. Some are saying that Nico needs to be more positive and fire into the hurdles, and other people who are equally intelligent saying, no, you've got to keep hold of his head and get him into the boards. And I think that comes down to where they're at, is that they're scratching the barrel now. For what it's worth, my opinion would be perhaps to put some cheap pieces on him and take him to Ireland, because they clearly seem pretty convinced that the biggest problem they've got going on is these padded hurdles that have clearly not suited him, or so they think. I struggle to understand quite that a horse would be able to distinguish so differently between the different types of hurdles. I think for me it's a lack of confidence. So I think I'd perhaps take him to Ireland, perhaps with a bit of cheap pieces on, just to see if you can focus him, because I was very aware that when he got down to the start, there were some lovely pictures, but he was walking on a long rein. He was really taking a good look around and taking it all in. I just wonder whether his concentration is not perhaps what it could be. And for me, it's a confidence thing. I've seen lots of people suggest going over fences. I understand the reason for that, in that if a horse doesn't respect a hurdle, something bigger might get them to back off and focus. But I don't think it's a lack of respect. I think it's a lack of confidence. All said and done, he came up out of Nico's hands, but if he'd have committed himself, he'd have got to the other side, whereas he didn't. He comes up, he thinks he's going to be brave, and then he changes his mind and all sort of drops his shoulders down into the middle of the hurdle and dives at it. Quite what they're going to do, I don't know. I was slightly surprised to see they so readily dismissed the idea of retirement. Strange though it would be to retire a champion hurdle at the age of 8 when he's healthy. But for me, the bottom line is that we understand the risks that jump racing involves for both horse and rider. And we do our best to negate those risks. I'll reference it back to Roger, who I had in a syndicate, and lost him just over a year ago now. And there's probably not a week that goes past where I don't think of him. I miss him dearly. And we went chasing with him as a 4-year-old, but we did that in the knowledge that we had done everything we could do to equip him for going novice chasing. Charlie Deutsch, who rode him in the race at Fosslas, to my mind is as good as anyone, if not the best chase jockey in the country. He'd been on and sat on Roger 3, if not 4 times, schooled him over fences. He'd done extensive pole work and jumping work through the summer, jumped a huge array of obstacles, and still made a bizarre mistake at the third last at Fosslas and paid the ultimate price. And it was a very tough time, it still is, but the one thing that keeps me going through is I feel I can look myself in the mirror and say I gave that horse every tool I possibly could to keep himself safe and do the job. And I think it's getting to the point now at Constitution Hill where you look at his performances and it's starting to become apparent that through no lack of effort, and let's make that absolutely clear, they're clearly trying everything, but through no lack of effort, he is seemingly now unable to possess the tools to get the job done in the very basic sense, because it's not a tired fall. It's not when they're quickly up into racing pace. This was just the second hurdle. It should be a fairly rudimentary job for him to go and get that done, and he didn't. So quite where they go next, I'm not sure. Wouldn't be at all surprised to see him turn up on the flat and have a spin round. But he's in the right place. There's some good thinkers and some intelligent people, and equally importantly, people that will put the horse before their own sporting gains at Seven Barrows. And I'm sure they'll do the right thing by Constitution Hill. And he may yet have the turnaround of all turnarounds and win the Champion Hurdle in March, because there's no doubt that he is a superb talent. Away from Newcastle, the feature race of the day came at Newbury in the Coral Gold Cup, or Hennessy as I far prefer to know it as, and it was won by Panic Attack, which is a sort of result that I feel like kicking myself a bit, really. She was my selection in the Paddy Power Gold Cup. I thought she was a well-handicapped mare, and she stayed on very well to win the Paddy Power Gold Cup. But I thought this 2-week turnaround and more importantly, this extra trip up to 3¼ miles was going to stretch her. I didn't really see her being a dour stare like this, but under Tristan Dorrell, who claimed £3, and that negated some of the rise she'd had in the handicap or a penalty that she carried. She was well in, she jumped well, she travelled well, and she scooted right away in the closing stages. It's rare to see horses back up so quickly in valuable competitive handicaps. But she was clearly a well-handicapped horse going into the Paddy Power. She's clearly in a rich vein of form. And often with mares, when they get into this little patch of form, they can do things that sort of sit outside of all the form they've shown in their career so far. She holds an entry in the King George. The Scoutmans don't need me to tell me how to campaign their horses. They're very smart indeed. But if she was mine, I'd be certainly giving it a go, because she's a proven jumper, she's a proven stare, she's clearly in a rich vein of form, and there'll be plenty of horses that turn up in the King George with questions to answer. She's a solid mare, and she deserves her place in that lineup while she's in such good form. The other race we should touch on from Newbury came on Friday, the long distance hurdle, won by Impostoir for Nicky Henderson, and a really excellent ride by Nico de Boringville. He has his detractors. I'm personally a big fan, and I thought this showed him at his best. It was a really intelligent ride. He refused to engage with strong leader and Sean Bowen early in the home straight. That horse is a dour battler, likes to be eyeballed. He kept Impostoir away, kept just in behind him, and then came with one run as late as he dared, and I think won a shade cosily. The handicapper hasn't adjusted his rating and he's on a mark of 153, so that suggests that he perhaps wasn't blown away by this performance. Strong leader was wearing cheek pieces for the first time. I'm not sure you could argue that it made all that much difference to his performance at Wetherby. Maybe Sean Bowen would tell you he found it easier through the mid part of the race, but I don't think it actually made Strong Leader pull out any more in terms of ability. And we know that he's probably just under that sort of top level. So Impostoir is going to have to improve again. But he's fairly unexposed at these trips. He's clearly progressive, and he certainly deserves to be campaigned now as a stayers hurdle horse in March. And then away from the UK over at Hyland, we should just touch on the Drinmore Chase, Grade 1 for the novices over 2 mile 4, won by Gordon Elliott, Jack Kennedy, who rode a treble on the day, Romeo Coolio, stepped up in trip, jumped really neatly throughout this contest. Jack Kennedy, I thought, gave him a very educational ride. He was at pains to sort of keep him on the bridle, let him go into the boards and pop and fiddle away. There was one or two fences down the back where he could have fired him in and got him using his scope, which his horse clearly has. But he was obviously riding, even in his grade one, with one mind on the future. Let him go in and pop and learn. Picked up very well in the home straight and sprinted away from the field. Of course, the problem that Gordon Elliott is going to have, if you can call it such a thing, is that there is no grade one for the novices or level weights competition at Cheltenham Festival for these novices over 2 mile 4. So he's going to either have to drop back in trip to the Arkle over 2 miles or step up in trip to the Browns Advisory. Personally, I wouldn't like either of those options for this horse. If I had to choose one, I think probably stepping up in trip is worth a roll of the dice, because I think on all known form we know that Romeo Coolio is not pacey enough for 2 miles against the very best. But of course, as we've mentioned before, it's not a given that you have to go to the Cheltenham Festival. There's plenty of good racing. They've got Fairyhouse Easter, they've got the Punchestown Festival, they've got Aintree as well. If he were mine, I think I'd probably keep him fresh and try and keep him from a late spring campaign and try and do Aintree and Punchestown and leave Cheltenham alone this year, and you can always go back next year as a Ryanair horse. But it was an impressive performance by Romeo Coolio. Slightly went under my radar last year as a novice hurdler, truth told. I sort of thought he was good but not special. I still hold that opinion to a degree. I think there's better novices out there. Certainly I'd have Final Demand above him in the staying ranks, and I would have Copper de Boards above him in the 2 mile ranks. But he's improving, he jumps sounding, he's clearly got a big engine, he's held in high regard by a good trainer, and there'll be plenty of races to be won with him at the top level this season. On to Handicap Movers and Shakers now. For those of you new to this episode, the BHA handicapping team released the revised handicap marks on a Tuesday morning, early doors at 7 o'clock. So this is horses that have run in the last week from the Sunday to the Saturday, and they'll have their marks adjusted. And indeed, if they've had 3 starts over hurdles, they're now eligible for a new handicap mark. So we'll start with horses going up in the weights. And the first is a horse from the Miller's Movers list, which is good to see. Blenkinsop. He won at Exeter on his second start, his first start over fences at 3 miles. He's got a rise of £5 up to a mark of 125, but he really caught the eye at Cheltenham on his chase debut, on his seasonal return. That was over 2 miles 4. I thought he did some good late work on that occasion. And here, despite the probably ground that's on the lively side for him, he jumped really nicely. I didn't think he was hard pressed to go away and win this. And I think when the ground turns softer and stamina becomes more of a premium, this is the horse that's got plenty of potential yet to give. Mark of 125, I don't think will be stopping him, nor will it be stopping the runner-up in that race, Andy Ammo for Rebecca Curtis. He was pretty disappointing on his seasonal return. That came at Aintree over 3 miles in a handicap novice chase. He was disappointing on that occasion, pulled up, got dropped £2. But he's now been raised back up that £2 to a mark of 122 for a runners-up effort here. His jumping still wasn't foot perfect. He needs to improve in that department, but his hurdle form last year, he progressed with every run. He's clearly a horse that takes a bit of time to get the hang of things. Clearly got an engine, and again, soft ground is going to see him to better effect. I think a mark of 122 will certainly not prove beyond him through the season. So that's the first 2 from that run of win of Blenkinsop himself, and the runner-up Andy Ammo off marks of 125 and 122. Jax Junior didn't get a mention in Miller's Movers, but he did feature in Plot Jobs earlier in the season. He ran in the Albert Bartlett last year, pulled up, but I thought he'd shaped well for a long way, and I thought on his novice hurdle form from last year, he looked a well-handicapped horse coming into this season. He won his second chase start, having shaped well behind Lump Sum at Uttoxeter on his chase debut, but he won comfortably at Kempton over 2 miles 2, so slightly up in trip. He's got a £3 rise now to a mark of 139. He's a strong traveller. He jumps really neatly and efficiently, and he stays well. He'll certainly stay further than his 2 mile 2. And whilst the race might slightly have fallen apart in behind him, I was still very impressed by his performance. He thought he looked very accomplished. And as he steps up in trip, this mark of 139 is certainly going to prove more than workable for Lucy Wadden. The biggest rise I'm going to feature this week is C'est de France for Sam Thomas. He's got a £12 rise up to a mark of 121, winning the per temps qualifier at market rating in very easy fashion indeed. I think the important thing to note about this is, despite being an easy winner, he was pushed right out to the line by Dylan Johnston. It's clearly a campaign to get this horse high enough in the handicap to actually get into the per temps final at Cheltenham itself. He's on the mark now of 121. Last year, 124 was the bottom weight, so it's feasible to think he's going to need to come up a little bit more yet. So despite the fact that he's got this hefty rise of £12, I think there might be a bit more to come. He's thoroughly unexposed at these staying trips. He's 3 from 3 now in handicaps, having started off a basement mark. But crucially, both his sire and his down, one on the flat over 2 miles. They showed all their best form at 2 miles on the flat. That suggests that they are stamina laden, and he looks like he's doing the same. So as the stamina starts to fly around, the ground gets a little bit softer. I think Stay Different, despite that £12 rise up to a mark of 121, might still be one worth following in those per temps qualifiers, where you're often trying to find horses that need to be showing their best, and he certainly does, because he's got to come up a few more pounds yet to guarantee himself a run at Cheltenham in March. Mambonumberfive is another that's featured on Miller's Movers already this season. He won again at Newbury, got a bigger rise this time, £6 up to a mark of 139, but he looked more professional again than he had when winning at Aintree on his chase debut. He's only a 4-year-old. He travelled very strongly. He got to the front too soon at Newbury under Ben Jones. That is a trait that Ben Jones does seem to have at plenty of tracks. He likes to go early, but certainly Newbury on more than one occasion this weekend, he's got to the front too soon. And I thought Mambonumberfive definitely idled when getting to the front. He's only a young horse. I think he showed signs of greenness. He's got a 4-year-old allowance that does taper off as the months go by. So we're now into December. So the £8 allowance is no more. It comes down a little bit, and it will continue to do so through January and February, but it's still a valuable allowance. He looks a talented horse. I think he probably is just about graded in terms of ability, but they'll be able to keep him in handicaps off a mark of 139, up £6. He'll stay further, but for now, I think they're still juicing his mark over trips of 2 miles, maybe 2 miles too. Newton Tornado was my nap from last week on the Thursday SBK betting podcast, and if you follow me in, truthfully, we didn't really have a moment's worry at Bangor in the 12:37 novice handicap chase. He'd fallen on his first start when being given quite an aggressive ride, but under Jamie Brace, a £5 conditional, he made all the running at Bangor on slower ground, jumped for fun, stayed on really strongly in the closing stages, didn't need to be pushed out all that much to win very comfortably indeed. And he's got an £8 rise, fairly hefty rise from the handicapper, but I think that was to be expected given how easily he won, up to a mark of 128. I still think this is an unexposed horse. I think he's going to improve with racing, particularly over fences. Rebecca Curtis often buys the type of horse that will improve over fences, and I'll certainly be following Newton Tornado wherever he goes next, provided he's kept to a realistic target. And then the final two are also horses that featured on Miller's Movers already this season. The first is French Ship. He won at Cheltenham, I should say, having unseated at Chepstow when he was a selection. He's got up now £10 for an absolute romp at Newbury, travelled very comfortably through the race, comfortably had the long-time leader Lador covered under Harry Cobden in the closing stages, and really nice ride by Harry Cobden, just how you should ride Newbury, very patient up the home straight, and then just gave an inch of rain in the closing stages, and Friendship fairly shot clear. So a £10 rise now up to a mark of 146. That's an £18 rise for the season. But my sentiments after that Cheltenham win remain. I'm going to keep following this horse until he proves to me that the handicap has got a grip of him. And whilst £10 is a fair rise, he won very easily indeed. It's hard to argue that another £10 on his back would have stopped him on Saturday. So if the Hobbs and Johnson White team stay in form, I'll be following Friendship wherever he goes next. A little bit of cut in the ground, and 2 mile 4, maybe even a little bit further. And then the final one, and was a horse I was really glad to see get it done. I've been a big fan of his for some time. He disappointed on his seasonal return in the Welsh Champion Hurdle, and that was Tutti Quanti, who took apart the Jerry Field and under Harry Cobden, another really good ride. He's got a rise of £8 now up to a mark of 138. But I think this is a talented horse. He was well beaten in the Supreme Novices, but he did some very good late work on that occasion, having been hopelessly tailed off at halfway. I'm convinced that when he sort of steps up in trip, he'll improve again. They might need to do that now. They've gone up to a mark of 138. I know they were toying with going over fences. I think for now, there's probably still room in this mark as a hurdler. And Tutti Quanti, now he's got back on track with that win at Newbury in the Joe Field, and is certainly a horse that I would advise you to keep following. So that was horses going up in the handicap. Now onto the horses coming down in the handicap. And the first one is a bit of an enigma, really. Jeriko du Reponet for Nicky Henderson. He finished behind Jax Junior in that 2 mile 2 beginners chase at Kempton. Jumped pretty soundly, having jumped appallingly last season on his one chase start, where if you remember, he got very upset in the saddling boxes beforehand, and that was attributed to his poor performance. He then reverted to hurdles last season, finished runner-up in the per temps at the Cheltenham Festival, and then won the valuable 3 mile listed handicap hurdle at the Punchestown Festival, where he reversed the form with Dolly the Great, who won the per temps. He jumped pretty well in the main at Kempton, a little bit big, a little bit careful on occasion, but he kept on going. His jumping warmed to the task. And I probably think the 2 mile 2 trip was just a little bit sharp. And like a lot of Nicky Henderson's, I think he shaped like he needed the run. So a pound back, a mark of 148, makes him of interest. He was 139 rated when he won at Punchestown. He's got the physique to look like a chaser. It'll just be interesting to see if we can try and figure out what the plan is with this horse. If he runs over 2 miles, 2 miles 2 next time, I would suggest that maybe they're trying to campaign him down the handicap a little bit for a handicap in the spring. Whereas if he were to step up in trip 2 mile 5, 3 miles, it might be that they're confident they've got a horse they can go to war with and might even be graded class in time, and that would make more appeal. But if they keep him at the minimum trip, I think I'd be avoiding him, but I'll certainly keep him in my tracker, because I think come the spring, when he gets a bit more of a stamina test, he could well prove to be a well-handicapped horse. I think this next one is a first for Millar's Movers, a horse that's won and still come down in the handicap, and that's the Henry Daly trained Wyenot. She won earlier last week at Ludlow, got a pound back down to a mark of 137. I think largely because Double Powerful was travelling well at the time, unseated at the third last, but I thought Wyenot was travelling really well. I think it's hard to say that she wouldn't have won anyway. She jumped really nicely on this chase debut, quickened up well. That was over 3 miles. She was 138 rated hurdler. She won a listed mare's hurdle. She was placed in a grade 2 mare's hurdle. She's clearly quite a talented horse, but she does need a sound surface. So as we go into the depths of winter, might be harder to find conditions for her, but I think it's hard to say that she's not going to be equally as adept over fences as she was over hurdles. So on that basis alone, the fact that she's a pound lower now off a mark of 137 over fences than a hurdle mark certainly makes her of interest. Kim Bailey and Matt Nichols are starting to hit a nice bit of form, and a horse that caught my eye was Laura Supply. He finished 4th at Hereford, and this was crucially first decent run for a while. He had a hood on and a tongue tie, the first time hood. Changed tactics. Normally they go and make the running with him, ride him prominently, make use of his stamina. On this occasion, he was settled towards the rear of the field. He was clearly ridden to come home, having weakened quite tamely on his last few starts. And he did come home. He got a little bit outpaced, but he kept on coming over this 3 mile 1 trip on pretty lively ground at Hereford, which can ride like a sharp track when the ground is like that. I think on a more galloping track, and with slightly softer underfoot conditions, this new mark of 113 dropped 2 pounds for being beaten 6 lengths when I think doing all his best work late on. It's just that Laura Supply is now handicapped to go and win a small race somewhere over 3 miles on a galloping track. Last Rodeo for Christian Williams has been in my tracker since the start of the season. I actually had him as a next best selection at the Cheltenham meeting 2 weeks ago, where he was a non-runner because of the changing ground. He ran in the Jerry Fielden at Newbury. I think that 2 mile trip was too short for him. It looked like he was going to get fairly badly detached going across the top, but he rallied really well at the home straight. He eventually finished 4th. I was surprised to see that the handicap has given him another pound back now, down to a mark of 117. He needs soft ground, but he certainly needs further than 2 miles. So wherever he goes next, and I fully expect him to turn up somewhere, probably over Christmas, 2 mile 4 handicap hurdle. I think last Rodeo off a mark of 117 is an exceptionally well handicapped horse. Well, we did find a couple of winners at the weekend from the podcast. I think the main issue was failing to read the weather reports properly, and what I hoped would be around about 5 mils of rain at Newbury turned into far more. That meant that I woke on Saturday morning fairly confident that all chance Hyland who'd been my main selection, had gone. This is a horse that's much better on a sounder surface, and he shaped well enough. He ran and he sort of showed up for a long way, jumped soundly, but couldn't really find that gear change that we associate with this horse on a sound surface. Sort of plugged on and was well beaten in the end. But the handicap has given him another 2 pounds back. He's down to a mark of 143 now. That's now a pound below his last winning mark. I consider him to be a well-handicapped horse heading into the Hennessy, so I have to consider that he remains so. He just needs proper underfoot conditions, which is a sounder surface. So it may be, as we head into the depths of winter now and the rain starts to fall, Hyland doesn't really get its conditions, but he's one to go into the tracker, perhaps for the spring when the ground starts to turn and ride a little bit nicer. I think he's a well-handicapped horse for Nicky Henderson. One more horse coming down in the handicap now, and I think if you're regular watchers of this and the Thursday SBK betting podcast, you'll know that Medrano has to feature. I'm starting to sound a bit like a broken record now, but I'm convinced this horse is well handicapped. He was my next best selection at the weekend. He was TC's nap, and I think we both feel like we didn't really get a run for our money. The way the 2 mile handicap chase at Newbury played out, it played to be ridden prominently, as it did all day in some regards, and Medrano was held up. He was never really put into it, given far too much to do by his jockey. But he's got £3 back from the handicapper. I thought that was pretty generous. He's now down to a mark of 136. There's definitely form in the book to suggest that this is a 140 horse at minimum. He is going to need to get a positive ride at some point. This is Ascot and Newbury now, where he's not really been put into the race. But I'm confident that if we remain with the faith, that Medrano will repay us at some point in the not too distant future off this new mark of 136. And then 2 more then for Handicap Movers and Shakers this week, 2 horses that are non-movers in the handicap. The first is Kamsinas. He was beaten just a neck by Wyenot in that Ludlow novice chase. Didn't jump at all well up the home straight. That was the winning and losing of it. But what I did like, even though he didn't jump all that well, the fences at Ludlow are quite stiff. They do take a bit of jumping, but he kept himself on his feet. There was certainly 1 or 2 occasions up the home straight where if he'd have not been so conscious, he could have toppled over. But despite making mistakes, he got his landing gear down. He kept on coming. There are easier tracks to jump around in the country than Ludlow. He's bound to have taken a bit of confidence in his jumping from this first effort. And a mark of 138, I think, looks more than fair. He's a horse that will stay 3 miles. He'll like a little bit of cut in the ground. He's with Fergal O'Brien, who's bound to find him an opportunity for the Noel Feely Racing Syndicate through the next month or so. And then the final one is the horse that I think was perhaps most hard done by in the Coral Gold Cup by that standing start. Quite why the starter decided not to let them go first time around is beyond me. It seemed like a fairly level break, but he pulled them back. They had a standing start. Pic Roc got the worst of that. He sort of got hampered at the beginning, was shuffled a long way back. This is the horse that's normally ridden fairly prominently. Ben Jones sat and waited and hunted around, hoped the race would come back to him, and it didn't. The first 3 home were all ridden prominently. But Pic Roc, I thought, fared best of all of those held up. He plugged on well in the closing stages. And crucially, for a horse that has had some jumping frailties, he won at Carlisle earlier in the season. He proved here that he can cope with a big field handicap and his jumping will pass the test. He stays on a mark of 135. I think he's got a big engine, and I'm sure there's a decent handicap pot in Pic Roc, provided he gets off to a level break with the rest of the field. So that's it for another episode of Miller's Movers. I'll be back same time next week, where we'll have a few more handicap movers and shakers, and of course we'll be reviewing the Tingle Creek and the Beecher Chase from this weekend. Till then, enjoy your betting, enjoy your racing, and I'll see you then.